Mayor Pro Tem. Good
Okay.
afternoon.
City Secretary, proceed. Am I okay to call the meeting to order? Okay. Meetings, I wanted to do that for 15 years. The meeting is now called to order. Please proceed.
Notice of a work session of the City Commission of the City of Brownsville pursuant to Chapter 551, Title 5 of the Texas Government Code, the Texas Open Meetings Act. Notice is hereby given that the City Commission of the City of Brownsville, Texas, in accordance with Article 5, Section 12 of the Charter of said city, will convene a special work session on July 25th, 2023 at 5 p.m. in the City Commission chambers located on the second floor of the Brownsville City Hall, Old Federal Building located at 1001 East Elizabeth Street. Okay, it is 5:04. The meeting has been called to order. Next item is invocation.
Pastor?
Tonight, we have leading us in prayer, Rolando Garcia. He is an international evangelist based here in Brownsville out of Cross Church in San Benito. So, Rolando?
Such a pleasure to be here with you guys today. The Bible says that he puts kings and priests in place, and we believe in blessing the authority of our cities.
Let's all stand for the prayer, and please remain standing afterwards for the pledge to the flags.
Thank you. So let's bow our heads. Father, we thank you because you are good and your mercies endureth forever. The Lord is the beginning of wisdom and understanding, and that's what we believe in this moment, Father. We declare that wisdom and understanding now flows freely in this place. We bless the authorities of our city, and we declare, Father, that you give them the wisdom that we need or that they need to be able to lead our community and Brownsville to the next level. Father, we bless every home. We bless every person that's part of this community. And we declare, Father, that there's protection over our cities in the mighty name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. And now we'll have a short moment of silence where we can all add our prayers to what has already been spoken. Amen. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
The following item is a work session. Presentation on fiscal year 2024 budget workshop number 1.
Good afternoon, everyone. A pleasure to be here. We had a very full day today. The city manager and myself, Helen, presented to Standard & Poor's and Moody's bond rating presentations, and both went extremely well. I spoke to the growth of the city, the economic development, the unity behind the commission working together, and then GBIC and BCIC working with City Commission as well. So we'll show a few slides on that and then walk you through the budget presentation. But I wanted to start just with a few fillers of where we're at right now. The final property tax valuations from Cameron County were due on Friday of last week. We did not receive them. And as of 5 o'clock this evening, we still don't have them. We expect to have them shortly. Loopy gets on the phone and calls our contact every day, and they assure us they're coming. We do need those to finish our truth in taxation, which will help formalize our final budget. I did want to talk a little bit about the Standard & Poor's Moody's meeting that Helen and I presented at today. When we had the bond rating a year ago, we got what was called a split rating, meaning that the Moody's rating was a little bit below Standard & Poor's. And so what happens is in the financial markets, if one bond rating is lower than the other, it sort of tends and trends to the lower rating. So today's meeting was very, very important to make sure we had equal bond ratings. We think we did well. Whether it was enough to overcome some of the economic perceptions of the income levels of people in Brownsville, we don't know. But we'll find out with our scorecard on Monday, and we'll be sure to let council know what our bond ratings are, and we will receive that on Monday. And then just to talk a little bit about the budget process, Helen has conducted a very collaborative process. Each department got together on their spoken time, presented their budgets, their needs. You know, I need more operating money. I need these headcounts to get my job done. I need this capital. And we listened intently. The budget group took good notes. Helen, you know, conducted the meetings in a very affirmative way where people were not afraid to come forward. Can you imagine if every request we said no to? we let people present because you never know when those requests might be meaningful. If we can't approve it this year, maybe we look at it mid-year budget next year. But it's good to know what people think they need and why they think they need it. And then I wanted to talk about the complexities of the budgeting process. I don't know if you're all aware, but we have 42 different funds. That is a lot of work. And most of the funds do get a budget with them. Some that are just for bonds don't. But it's a very complex process. So I wanted to say thank you to the budget staff for all the time that they put in so far. Many weeks, it's been 7 days a week. We've met Helen before she went on vacation out here on the weekends. So, you know, it's been a really great effort from the team, and I wanted to thank them from the bottom of my heart because I know it's not been easy. And that brings us to where we are tonight. So with that, wanted to just, you know, show you a picture of yourselves. They're all not timely pictures, and hopefully we can get them updated soon, but I wanted to just talk about the depth and breadth of the council. We feel very blessed. If you look at the background of some of the council members, you know, they've been on the GBIC board committee. We have entrepreneurs. We have people that have been in the medical field. We have educators. It's such a wealth of cross-sections of skills. We feel blessed to have you as commissioners. It's not just one discipline that's represented, it's across the board. We think that works for good collaboration, and I tell my finance staff that the commission as a whole is finance friendly, meaning that you understand financial terms. If we present it in a way that there's a ROI or some return for the city, whether it be customer service or enhanced revenue, you understand it, and we feel blessed working with you. If you look at the pillars that you established more than 4 years ago, which will be updated when Helen meets an offsite in September, it's real clear. You want us to focus on economic development, planning and zoning, the infrastructure, public safety, quality of life, and governance. And so when we make decisions or the city manager makes decisions, we try to use that as a guideline of what we should be following. And I love this slide. It shows a lot of different moving parts in the city working together. We have GBIC, the city commission, the city management, and BCIC. And why that's so important, you know, today when we presented to the bond rating agencies, we spoke of the ability to get, you know, agreement in order to fund the airport debt. We look at what GBIC and BCIC have in their fund balances. They have significant dollars that are unreserved, which working with the city, they'll invite Helen to their strategic planning methods meetings that are coming up. And in coordination with them, we can vote and deliver on long-range projects that will bring more sustained growth to the city and economic development, whether it's through the sale of land, encouraging other business to come here, or giving business incentives for businesses that are already here. It's really huge. And it all goes together with this 15-minute concept of the city. The lady that cuts my hair, I told her about the 15-minute city, and she goes, well, Mike, that's not right. I go, what do you mean? She goes, well, it used to be 10 minutes before the pandemic, and now that everybody's moved here and the economy's moving, it's 20 minutes. And I said to her, well, 10 and 20 divide by 2, that's 15 minutes, so are we close? And she just laughed. So anyway, I love the concept. SpaceX and LNG, you know, we're talking, we'll show you tonight, our financial statements, historic, but we think the future is better, right? You know, increased sales tax, maybe some property tax development too from people that move here. And then the smart roadmap, the 5G, part of the bond issuance involves some monies for year 1 of the 5G. It's going to help with traffic synchronization. It's going to help with the 5G concept and also help with hazards from blocking thwarting attempts from getting into our infrastructure and hacking. The broadband project isn't pretty when you see the orange out on the street, but it's very well needed. Helen told the story today to the bond rating people about working with the school system too. Not all of our homes have internet connectivity. There was a valedictorian at one of the schools that was trying to apply for a scholarship, couldn't get connectivity, but somehow went to a Starbucks, got the connectivity and actually got a scholarship. We're trying to build a infrastructure for the future leaders of this city. And we think the broadband monies that we got from ARPA are a very good return. And it's also a project that we're working together with PUB on. So it shows the collaboration of different groups working together. Also this week is the Games at Texas. I know from having seen the data, we have 2,412 hotel rooms and all of them are filled from Thursday through Sunday. So this event is very huge for sales tax and economic development, and it's also going on next year. And it's been a collaboration with quite a few volunteers from the city working together to make it happen. So we hope and pray it's a success for the next few days and everything comes off safe. The Charo Days are something that's unique and shows our international collaboration with our sister city across the border. And it's a very festive time for the city. The Gladys Porter Zoo is also one of the bond covenants where we have monies going $2 million for matching. And that zoo brings a lot of economic development to the city. And the quality of life here is important with all the parks initiatives and the trails, the biking places to run. We think it's a very livable city. And that's one of the tenets, which was the quality of life. And just the success of the Avelo Airlines with the 2 new routes that came in, the 3rd one that's coming, the load factors on those are in the high 90s. And we expect the Las Vegas one to be even better. So a lot of neat things on one slide for economic development. You're not going to see that in our financial statements historically or necessarily the budget, but we think the future looks really, really bright for the city. So just a few more things on the bond issuance that we talked about. You know, there's a large portion of the money is going to street improvements, and that's that very first circle with citizens. If you look at the bond issuance, it's $12.5 million with highways and streets. There's another $2 million in our operating budget to bring $14.5 million to citizens. And we feel it's very important that the funds that the taxpayers pay in actually go back out to help them. And you're seeing evidence of that. And then also with this, it's very, very important to point out that with the debt that we were able to issue and get approval for it through our bond rating is that we're lowering the debt rate, 0.264 to 0.25. It's going to decrease the variable rate for taxpayers, not the overall amount, but the amount that they're being charged on the debt piece. We don't know our M&O rate or our operating rate, and we'll get that through that truth of taxation process that's going to be finished as soon as we get the final valuations. And then there's money in there for historic buildings. There's 1.5 million. Historic buildings are very difficult to bring up to standard in current day, and they cost more money, but it's very much a part of the city's history to renovate buildings that we do own. The Gladys Porter Zoo that we talked about, there's always money needed for public works and drainage. And in police and fire, we have new ambulance and fire trucks. It's very important over a 10-year period to replace so many per year because there's a lead time of 18 to 24 months on a fire truck or ambulance. And so we don't get everything that we order immediately. And that's why it's so important. We talked a little bit about the network switches and the 5G. So we have a really balanced approach. Leading into this year, in December, we had a new police contract. And then in September, we had a fire contract. And you ask, what are the importance of this? It's stability, knowing what our cost structure is going forward. But if you look at our financial statements, and nobody looks at this section, but we did talk with the bond rating agencies today, they have what's called a sink or swim test. And it's the coverage that you have on your pension liabilities. And to state it in simple terms, if your coverage ratio goes down, you're sinking. If it stays the same, you're floating. And if it's going up, you're swimming. And ours are going up over a 5-year period. Part of that was the successful negotiation of those contracts where each party gave in, but overall we think the city's winning. And then competitive wages for our employees. It's been a huge priority for the city manager to make sure that we retain existing talent, we attract new talent, and we work on our attrition rates. You know, not everybody leaves because of money, but if you don't have money, it's hard to keep good people here. You can address the values of the culture and making it a good place to work, but at the end of the day, people need to buy groceries. They have to have a place to live for their family and fill up their car with gas. And we'll show you some slides of what inflation have done for our employees over the last 10 years. So you look at the bond rating, the 29.6. We went through all these projects. I won't belabor that again. It's 2 years for year 3 and year 4 of the strategic plan. And then Old Highway 77, the network project for 5G, and then the Zoo Master Plan and historic preservation. And if you look at the list and you go, why on the top does it say 29.6? And you've got detail for 30.2 million. Well, when a bond issuance goes to market, there's a discount rate. So if the market rates are 4%, say for a coupon, and you want to offer a 5 to be more market competitive, you're going to change the amount of the offering. And that's why our analysts are telling that our 30.2 million request will actually be 29.6. So a little bit more on the police contract. It was done, as I said, in December 22. The first year was a 4% COLA increase. The second year was 4%. And that contract expires in December of 2026. That contract was not in place last year when we did the budgets. It was executed post-budget. The fire contract was in last year's budget. It was executed in September. It was year 1 at 3%, and then year 2 also at 3%. Last year, there was a budget for the new council members, a budget subcommittee that was done for compensation. We'll talk a little bit about the 16 comparable cities and what we were able to implement and what we couldn't implement. We implemented last year an 88% pay raise compensation study to get people within 12% of their comparable positions for the 16 market cities. We could not, because there wasn't enough money, do the 12%. So right now in this year's budget, we have the 12%, and it equates to $431,000. And we'll show you.
And so, just to add
go
to
ahead.
that, we did talk to, when we were talking through the whole 4-pronged approach to the compensation plan, we did say if we could do the 12% sooner, we would try. So some of this is that analysis. And then with regard to the police collective bargaining agreement, it is really important to note because we're making up the 4% and additional 4%. So it's 8% versus the fire contract that had been negotiated prior to the budget. So just please keep those things in mind because those are important.
Thanks, Ellen. So if you look at the 16 comparable cities, we tried to color code it to make the comparison a little bit easier, but all 16 were included. The dark brown represents cities in the valley. You got Edinburgh, Harlingen, Laredo, McAllen, Pharr, and Mission. And those all make a lot of sense because they're nearby, they're close, and conceivably people could commute to those cities for a job if they so desired to. And then you have other cities that are a little bit further away in orange. You got Beaumont, Pasadena, Baytown. Grand Prairie's obviously near Dallas. I don't know how they made the list, but they're a comparable city. New Brownsville and Galveston round out that section in orange. And then in dark green, you have Victoria and Corpus Christi, a little bit outside of the valley, but not too far away. And then you have 2 cities that are primarily Latino, San Antonio and El Paso. So those are the 16 cities that benchmark was done against. So we talked about the 88% last year cost us $3.1 million. It was monies well spent. And then the 12% that we couldn't do was the 431 that we're going to fund this year. I wanted to point out a really important thing is that the COLA or cost of living increase for civilian employees, the last time the city did one was 2014. So going into this budget cycle, it was a huge priority to make sure that we could do one this year. Inflation from 2014 to 2023 is 28.6%. We'll show you a slide on that. That has issues because in 2014, employees in the city weren't necessarily at market rates. So we just compounded it for 10 more years by not giving employees increases. So it just made the situation worse. And it affects retention rates and turnover. We're not going to give you stats on retention rates and turnover. We know it's getting better, but it's still an issue having to recruit employees. I have a slide with a number of open positions. We have over 100 open positions right now. We tell everybody that the staffing with the city is 1,200 people. It's not. It's more like 1,091. And this was as of the last payroll because we had over 100 open positions. And then we talked about organizational culture. We believe it's gotten better. It's collaborative. Employees are encouraged to participate. Helen's driving the effort. We think our leadership is doing a fairly good job with that as well. And, you know, it's never a perfect environment, but it's an all one. That's where the term comes from, one city working together. And then career development is important too. We did some pilot programs in educational assistance and helping people get their license in the HR department or ODHR and also in finance. And hopefully in our budget going forward, we can do that across the board.
Looking at educational reimbursement.
Here's that chart that shows it all, right? 2014 till now, and you look at the very bottom, the green happens to be an increase, which is not necessarily good, but green typically connotates something positive, and red means that the cost of living went down. So if you look at that chart, 28.6% inflation, a lot of it's been over the last few years, right? The easy money during the pandemic created inflation, caused the labor rates to go up and caused the cost of living just to go up substantially. So that's it. It's represented with that empty shopping cart versus a cart full of grocery items. It's tough for our employees to make ends meet, and we just wanted to illustrate the point. So this one, it happens to be the 2023 budget, and I want to point out what makes Brownsville different. And it's different from a five-pronged approach. The city here uses property tax and sales tax together. Most cities just rely on property tax with a little bit of sales tax, but we have this five-pronged approach. We get monies from our landfill, and why is that significant? The landfill has a budgeted amount of $9.3 million per year, and the landfill is truly an enterprise fund. It funds its own needs, it buys its own capital equipment, and we have a slide on that later on. It's done some remarkable things recently. The management there has extended the useful life of the landfill. We've been able to get a contract with Harlingen, and on top of that, they're buying their own equipment. We think that the landfill actually has more economic potential. They're not selling the gas that's produced on the landfill. There's groups that can do that. We may look in that for even a further revenue enhancement. But that's the third prong, is the landfill. The fourth one is the bridge. The bridge is not run by the city, it's run by Cameron County. We get 50% of the profits after expenses. This year's been abnormally robust. We budgeted a little bit over 2.4 million, and we're tracking to 4.2 million. So a $1.8 million surplus because of the activity over the bridge and the influx of immigrants. Very, very strong activity this year. And then lastly is our relationship with PUB. It's important, but it's not the only revenue that we get in for the city. It's about 12%, a little bit over $14 million. It's helpful. And I want to remind everybody, when we do the financial statements, PUB is a component unit of the city. It's not the other way around. And it's very important to recognize that we work together and collaborate together. And we have other projects with them. The fiber project, we're working on an MOU, the Resaca agreement. So we're starting to work together the way we should. There's always some conflicts, but we think we're moving ahead in the right direction. So I want to talk to you about a plan to maybe get your permission. We'll talk a little bit how we're seeing 23 close out. We have the benefit of having 9 months worth of activity. The fund balance for FY22 at the end of the audit for the general fund was 53.4 million. And you can't just stop there. You have to look at what's unassigned, meaning there's no other spoken uses for that fund balance. So at the end of the year, it was 43.3 million, which happens to represent 113 days. And so you go, well, what do you mean 113 days? Well, you take that unassigned fund balance, you divide it into the total year, and how many days of coverage does that give you? And why that's important here is we're located on the coast. Conceivably, you could have a disaster with a hurricane. So you want to make sure you've got that 90 days of coverage. In addition, the reason I went into length about our bond offering, not only we lowered tax rates, but we didn't tap out the city. The city is eligible to borrow over 40 million, and that bond is 29.6. So there's wiggle room on our borrowing capacity, and there's wiggle room on our days that we have encumbered. So in the event that we had a catastrophe here, we'd survive. It might be difficult, but we could get through financially. And that's why it's so important to point that out. If you look at our forecast for the end of this year, our budgeted revenues are being surpassed. We're going to collectively exceed our revenue by about $12 million. 10 of that is in sales tax. And we got a slide that shows that sales tax has been really, really robust, and it's driving the bulk of our revenue gains. Property taxes are coming in about where they should. You look at the other components, PUB is right where it should. The landfill will probably use the 9.6, and then the bridge I mentioned was a little bit over. Those 5 components are 85% of our revenue, and that's why that strategy is so important. It diversifies our risk. The other 15% comes from things that are everyday for the city. We have the court going on, where fines and fees. We have permitting. We also have interest income and miscellaneous income through the legal secretary's office as well. So the bulk of our revenue budget comes from those 5 initiatives and then our everyday services. So what we're proposing is the surplus that we have at the end of the year, 1.1 million. What Helen and myself are proposing is that we'd like to give a one-time stipend to civilian full-time employees equal to, you can see 672 people there, equal to $1,315. That's pre-tax. And those part-time employees, the 37 people, would get half of that amount, or 658. We think that's a good use of the funds given the COLA situation and what's happened. And we'll present the COLA, what Helen wants to do for that as well. So if you look at the bottom there with our staffing and the 1,091, we have 672 full-time civilians. We have police at 221, and I know there's some vacancies there, and then fire at 198. That rounds out the 1,091. That was from our most latest payroll data. So it's accurate and recent, and it is what it is right now. So that's part of what we're proposing for the end of the year. I want to point out that even with that stipend, that we're still going to be at that 90 days coverage. And that's important. And we think the revenue estimates that we have are conservative. It wasn't me alone. I mean, I got some good minds in the finance and accounting department. We took our best people and asked them to make the projections. The budget people did. Martha, who's got a lot of years of experience, and Loopy made a stab at it as well. So it wasn't just one person making a stab at year end. And then we collaborated and talked on it as well. So we think that number is pretty conservative. This is back to what I was just illustrating, where the money comes from. And our budget right now for 24 mirrors 23 with this conservative approach. And these are the numbers that we temporarily have in our system as we speak right now, pretty close to the 23 budget that we have. I want to point out the amazing growth of our property taxes. If you look from 2013 to 2022, it's gone from 5.6 billion to 7.9. If you annualize that, about a 7% growth rate. But over the last 5 years, it's accelerating, 10.6 versus the 7%. And as you know, the Senate Bill 2, you're able to keep on existing property values only 3.5% year over year. But on the new property, you get to keep 100%. And so if you look at the FY23 amounts, about 8% is all from new property. So we keep that at 100, and 92% is at existing. And this year was phenomenal. It was up 31.5%. Overall, residential is 36, It's a burden for the taxpayers. That's why when we talked about the debt rate going down, why it's so important. The overall bill's going up, but the rate is going down for debt. And we'll see where the M&O ends up for the city. Commercial values went up 12.5. The reason it's so important to have a mix of commercial and residential, as we all know, $100,000 on a property tax bill from residential is harder to support from the city than it is commercial. The reason, because you have fire, police, and all these services, you try to get a mix. And Helen talked today about a 60-40 mix. We're not at for the city, so we need more business to come through. That's why those relationships with GBIC and BCIC are so important, that we get this combined growth. It's not all residential, that's both commercial and residential. And surprisingly enough, the average home values on the latest property tax appraisals with $280,000, which seems very high for the Valley and Brownsville. That's where the numbers stood. And $1 on property tax assessments is only $1 if you collect it. And I want to point out that the last 10 years, those numbers in yellow, probably a little hard to see, but it's gotten better. This past year, we had a 97% collection rate within the same year. And it's very, very important to note that. And our taxpayers here are tenacious. They pay even after the due date. The due date's in January. They pay up through March. We get a large portion by March, but we even have people that pay April, May, want to hold on to their houses. You know, the property homes that people live in are very important. You don't see this in the rest of the country where payments past March. So very, very important to note. The next slide shows that dynamic sales growth. And numbers all are about where you start, right? So 2015, you see the decrease of 5.8 million from the prior year. We actually did have sales tax go down 1 year. But since that time, the 20.6 to this year's 43.7, we've doubled the sales tax growth. 112.5%, that's more than doubled. Annualized, it's 14.1% a year. And why I think this slide is so important, it shows the organic, sustained growth, but it also shows our budgeting policies. Our budgeting policies have limited us on sales tax to 2.5% a year. And so all of the excess, the 14.1 versus the 2.5, has gone into the mid-year budget or into a reserve. We end up doing it on one-time expenditures as opposed to being able to do something with our employees. And that's why we're asking for you this year to maybe take a look at our proposal or do something a little bit different. But this trend shows what's happening. And the risk on sales tax that you listen to other cities, city managers and finance people, is they'll tell you horror stories about sales tax. They depended upon that for their budget, and then it didn't come in and they had to make reductions. We're not being overly aggressive here. We have a proposal to move it up slightly for 1 year and then come back through our budget subcommittee and review it and see where we're at next year.
Yeah, I think what you'll note is that with sales tax, we even grew during COVID and also because people shop local, right? So you didn't see that leakage to other communities. And also even despite, the migrant influx, we've been, dealing with that situation for the last 4 years. And so that's what's unique about and the resiliency of our economy. If you look at it, all border economies, ours is very unique in that sense.
So if you look at this picture of the landfill and look real closely, you can see the birds sort of circling in the background. It's the best picture we can find of the landfill. You don't smell anything from there, but it is a lot of potential. We talked about the 9.3 million transfer, Harlingen been added. And another thing to look at the landfill is just the bulk that they're being able to service. We got figures that show increases around 7% a year for the last 3 years, and it's a little bit higher now with Harlingen. And there's other cities actually entertaining wanting to use our landfill. Instead of being just a city landfill, it's almost become a regional destination. And as we get more landfill from other cities, it obviously add to the financial picture. And the staff there has worked on other methods, from going to conferences to extending the useful life and listening to consultants. The thing left to be tapped is using the gas that's produced out of there and able to get money from that through private industry and reselling it. So more potential. And then what we're really proud of is that they fund themselves. It's a true enterprise fund and they buy their own equipment. We talked about PUB and how important that relationship is. It's about 13% of our overall revenue and 14.4 million this year. This is the bridge. The first time I made this slide, one of my staff pointed out we didn't have the right bridge. So we quickly got the correct bridge up here and got this corrected. And again, I'm pointing out that we had a budget of 2.4 million. You don't see that on here, but we're tracking to a little bit over 4 million. So this is a very, very useful source of revenue. And then we talked about, bringing up the rear with the other 15%, and interest income has been really high. Permitting, we have a slide on that, and we'll talk a little bit about that. The franchise tax has been steady. And the one thing we do want to mention, we mentioned the fiber project. We don't have any assumptions for fiber within the 2024 revenue budget. So in the event that some monies do come in from it, it'll all be a windfall and a surplus to what we're assuming. This is the permitting one, and you look at that and you go, ouch, look at the drop versus last year. But I like to present it a different way. Last year was a pandemic year, abnormally low interest rates. If you take out 2022 and look at the other years and compare 2023 to the other years, we're almost double. It's like 2 years for one. And so that shows with the high interest rates, a little bit over 6%, that we're still getting a lot of economic activity in the city, the building, the growth. And the Acela software is helping them turn around those requests in a reasonable period of time. And that's why this chart is so important. We have sustained growth even with higher interest rates. So the proposal for 2024, as we all know, we have to have a balanced budget. So when we did revenue, again, this is just budget over budget, not actuals versus budget, but 24 budget versus 23 budget. We have a net increase of 3.4 million as we sit right now. That 12% from the compensation that we didn't implement last year is 431,000. The impact of a COLA for 3.5% across all civilians is almost 1.5 million. The year two of the fire is 489,000. And the reason police is so much higher is because it represents 2 years, right? The 4 and the 4 are 8%. 8% versus their old contract is actually 1.6 million. So I don't want to say we don't have a choice, but the issue is their contracts, right? So when we have a contract, we have to fulfill those and we have to budget per the contract, no ifs, ands, and buts. So I'm just pointing out where the numbers are coming from. And then there's been some increases given this year, about 895,000. So if you took the 3.4 and just stopped there, we have a deficit of 1.5 million, which is about the cost of the COLA that we want to give. What we're proposing to you tonight and the ability to move forward is asking for the ability to change the sales tax that the budget subcommittee had at 2.5%, change it from 2.5 to 5.5, which would add a little bit over $1 million. And then from that surplus that we have for FY23 is bring some dollars out of there. Again, still keep it at 90 days. And that would put us at a balanced budget. If commission is okay with that, we would go back. And the next time we come to you, you're going to see a bunch of income statements with expenses in them that'll have line item detail that traditionally you see in the budget. The reason we're not presenting that now is we don't have the property tax firmed up and we don't have these tenants with the sales tax firmed up. We will come back at the next meeting with that, and you can look at income statements till your heart's content to see what we have a line item. And it'll be for every department, for every fund, because that's what a budget is. But this is a very strong incentive that the city manager wants to meet, which is to be able to reward employees with a COLA. We're not bringing them back to competitive wages across the board, but we are making up a little bit of inflation and we're doing what we can for employees. We feel that retention is so important. And as Commissioner De Los Santos said to me, we can do all the technology we want in the world. We can have all our operating expenses in the world as well, but there has to be somebody here that turn on the lights in the morning. So that's what we're coming to you for our proposal. So with that, I'll be quiet, but I'll point out one more thing, is that with this tenant, we have the structure that our sales tax can't be any more than 30%. What it's going to do at 5.5% is bring it to 30.1, so just a rounding error. not an error, but an increase, which is 179,000 over 30%. So with that, we would love for your comments and anything, Helen, you want to say for direction, for consideration, certainly appreciate it.
Other than, even with the projection of sales tax being from 2.5 to 5.5, it's still much less than what we've been trending, which is 14%. So it's still very conservative. And I would say being able to use 30.1% of sales tax for personnel, it's really insignificantly more than we did it. We're not asking for 50% or even 40%. It's just a slight difference more, which will make a world of a difference with being able to retain employees.
Any comments, questions?
I have a couple of questions. I know, and I like where we're headed with this because this hits all my priorities with the cost of living adjustment, with getting folks to the midpoint that we identified through the compensation study. I know one of the gaps that we identified after that was in the fire department with probationary firefighters. I know we're working towards bringing them up in pay over the next 2 years. I know we discussed that during the budget workshops. I'm curious though, since they are an anomaly with regard to bargain for contracts and the compensation study, where would they fall with regard to those one-time stipends we're talking about? Because they're still below where everybody else is going to be.
Right, and that would be a separate analysis because one-time stipends we're looking for civilian, but I have talked to Chief Sheldon about that. I think he said like the first firefighters that were hired, we're stuck with the older probationer pay, but that we could look at with the newer ones that we would be looking at phased over 2 years.
Yeah,
So we could still look at
Since
that.
we know it's going to be a 2-year catch-up for the newer ones, and since we know the existing ones are already behind, I'd like us to consider including them in that one-time stipend.
Okay, okay.
Great point. And when we finalize our budget with the tax rates, if you view that as a priority, we can see if we can work it into, bringing their pay up as well. I don't know if it'll be financially possible, but we'll show you the consideration and what the dollars are. We've already modeled it. It's just whether our tax rates allow for it.
Absolutely.
But great point, and thank you.
And I think that's my only question and comment for right now.
We thank you. We know the budget process isn't perfect. We've had a lot of requests for a new headcount, for operating expenses, for new technology. And we know the city needs that, and we can't make everybody happy, but we view a priority of making sure that pay is met first. And I think this strategy is probably one that will continue into the next fiscal year. The property value increases that we had aren't going to go down, so that will allow us the liberty to be a little bit more aggressive going forward. And we think it's a blessing. That's why the economic growth that we started off with is so important, is that when that comes in, it gives you the ability to manage your expenses. When you don't have property tax increases, you're sort of handcuffed, not much you can do. So we feel blessed in this day and time to have something to work with. It's not everything that we want to work with, but at least we have some dollars to redeploy. And today's bond meetings went well, and we're hoping that that will allow us for additional growth as well.
I just have a comment, and that's a compliment, actually. When I was first elected, I had an interview with COB-TV about 3 days after my election, and the first question was, what are you going to do about the budget? And I thought, you could be asking me what I'm going to do about Mars, for that matter. The budget is a huge, complicated, complex process, as it should be, because it governs the entire city and the needs of so many. And I compliment you and your staff for your very hard work and explaining it in such an understandable fashion, because that hasn't always been true. So thank you very much for the work that you and your staff do.
It takes an entire village and an entire department. It's certainly not me. I have very good, capable people. They're working well together. And the compliment goes to our city manager too. She's conducted those meetings in a very wholesome approach, listening to all the requests and never saying outright no, which is hard to do, but listening, and it sets an example for all of us. Listen to the request, evaluate it, but don't say no right away. So we know we're going to have to say some no's, but at least gives people the chance to voice what their needs are. And that's why it's so important.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Just
for your
Thank
time.
you to the finance department for all the work. I know they've spent many weekends working. This is the season to do that. And also to our directors for really, they've also, talked to their employees what their needs are. We have looked at, the price of materials and costs have gone up. So yes, that gets baked into the budget, or the cost of food for our animal shelter, those are the things. One of the things that you will find in August, we're gonna come back and show you all the different grants that we've been awarded. There's millions and millions of dollars of new grants that we've been awarded, and we haven't really presented that in a comprehensive way because it spans from fire department to EOC to, just so many departments have received many more new grants than we've ever received in the history of the city. So there's so much information to collect. Probably on the 1st or the 15th, we'll come back and give you a really comprehensive analysis of all the grants. There's some matches, but I would say most of it does not. Some of them do not require matches, so they're 100%. Thank you. That concludes our presentation.
I think one of the other things I'd like to see as we move forward, and I understand, like you say, there are times we're going to have to say no because there are just a finite number of dollars out there. But I would like to see, as a commissioner, what are the wish lists for the departments that, and I understand we're going to have to prioritize. We can't say yes to everything. We just can't afford to do that. But I'd love to see what it is that we've got on hold that's coming in the future once funding's identified for it. I'd like to see that for all of the departments for the city, but I'd also like to see it especially for the city auditor's office and the city attorney's office, since those are separate and apart. I think it's good for us as commissioners to be able to look at those and know what the needs are, what the future plans would be if their wish list could be granted. That way we've got that in mind for the future as we plan.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about prioritizing. We have a really robust mid-budget amendment. Even in our last mid-budget amendment, we met with all the departments that had not been done before, and then we prioritized kind of together, just like we did the CIP. And so we can come up with what we believe are the priorities. And then I did meet with the city auditor's department and city attorneys on their plans. And then we can definitely present those priorities from different departments.
Don't sterilize it too much for us.
Along with
Well,
that.
I mean, I wouldn't, but I mean, sometimes it's just, it can be something as simple as,
Right.
I don't know. It can be something very, very small. But I think that they also need to, I think what I appreciate about our directors and our departments is that the one city concept, right? What is the overall priority? The CIP committee, it's made up of many departments. And so seeing them come together and say, you know what, that really is a priority. We really do need that piece of equipment or whatever that is, that match for the bus service. I mean, some things were unexpected. We didn't really expect the Sunday service. I mean, we did a Sunday service pilot, and that, if you saw in the presentation, it talked about bus service being over budget. Well, that was a pilot that we did for Sunday service that proved to be successful. So out of that success, we didn't really know what the cost was because it was a pilot. Now we know that it's in the millions of dollars.
Mhm.
And so what we're challenging also directors is not just tell me how much I would like to have, but where's the revenue? How much are we thinking also revenue generation? What's the revenue generation or the grant of, not every department's going to make money, but are we also challenging them to look at revenues, right? And forecasting it in the best way. So I think we would look at both.
No, and thank you guys for that. And I know especially on the bus route, I get requests from constituents, and not even in District 3, but for added services for the military highway area. And I know those are things that we need to look at, but again, financially, it's got to be practical for us to do that. And thank you guys who are part of those committees, especially to be able to identify, because I know I have to do it up here sometimes and say, there's a greater need in District 1 or a greater need in District 2, and we need to start with resources there before we do District 3. So I respect all the department heads that are able to make those tough decisions. Thank you.
Along with that wish list, I'd like to know, for each item, are there grants that could cover all or part of that wish that we have not applied for, or that we have applied for but were turned down? And there's a whole story behind that, which I will share when you do the grant presentation. But grants are free money, period. Or they are money that buys down the cost of something that we need, and they should never be underestimated. So along with that wish list, I'd like to see the potential for what we could apply for, but maybe we didn't have time, or maybe we did and we didn't get it. How can we improve that grant for the future?
Ms. Commissioner, I think what we're doing different is we're trying to also identify, because sometimes there's new grants and then there's a required a matching fund, and that's a new hit. So the question is for directors is, what's the probability you think that you'll get the grant? I mean, to the best of your ability, and if you think there could be a match, what do you think that would be, so that we have that kind of reserved amount of money for that? But that's actually, that's also challenging them, like how do I maximize the grants that are out there? Do.
Okay. Next item is adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting has ended at 5:53.